Hello, welcome back to the Three Orcs channel. My name is David, and today we're going to go over druids in the Viscounty of Verbobonc and the surrounding areas for the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign. As you can see on my article here, I created one for druids of the gnarly forest. We're going to talk about all the druids in the area, as far as Furyondy, Veluna, the Wild Coast, the gnarly forest, the Cron Hills, and in Celene and the Viscounty of Verbobonc. Generally, most of the druids would probably come from the gnarly forest, depending on which of the old faith gods that they worship. Of course, there's many druids in the Viscounty of Verbobonc and all the small towns like the village of Hamlet, and we'll go over that too. But so you'll get an idea of the faith, the organization behind the druids. We'll start with the gnarly forest. The article here that I have talk about that the druids of the gnarly, there's no more than 30. They usually dwell alone. They revere Alona, and this reason have some friends among the wood elves. Druids do not care for woodsmen, but they know they respect the forest. They welcome the gnarly rangers, which is another organization, another video that I've done. The swan mays are a sisterhood of humanoids who can assume swan form, kind of like a werewolf, but were-swans. In normal form, they resemble slender, tawny, attractive females, generally clad in light robes and some form of white and feathered garments. In swan form, they resemble swans. And I believe I have a picture of them I can show you. The picture here of a swan that I just chose. I have a history and a background of the swan may and some artwork here. Generally, the druids of the Swan May look pretty much like this. I got some artwork here for them. And they are a staunch defender of the gnarly forest. Sometimes they request assistance from the gnarly rangers or the elves of the gnarly. Then to continue with the druids of the gnarly forest, adventurers are avoided unless a druid has need of help, like the druids of the old faith. We'll go over that in a minute too. There is an archdruid in the eastern gnarly, Holdifer Paravis. He has a home some 15 miles east of Beltlander. Holdifer has her own articles. It's a female. She's the archdruid. I have a description that she dwells with brownies and hawks and bears that home guard her treehouse. A ranger knight, or more often swan may, have come to the archdruid with information for help. The druids are often referred to as the bards of the gnarly, for they treasure oral folklore and tales, and many have proficiencies in singing and musical instruments. The great druid for the region that encompasses the dominion of Greyhawk is Holdifer Paravis, that being Selus for the feathered. She makes her home in the gnarly forest, where she is on excellent terms with the rangers and the swan may, and the fae. She is known to use her thousand faces ability to take a variety of disguises. Her favorite is a half-elven bard who travels throughout the lands on the border of the gnarly, carrying news while collecting tales to preserve the oral history of the region. Until this year, Holdifer held rank of archdruid. She won the challenge against the former great druid at the summer solstice, where she collected more fireflies, 1,526 to be exact, in a single night. As her first act, Holdifer has reclaimed several megalithic circles in and around this gnarly forest. She has ordered the druids to call back the bracken and restore the manors of their former glory. This activity has attracted a lot of attention among the fauna and the fae of the gnarly, who have been gathering at these points. The Greyhawk militia is watching these events very carefully for fear that she may take strong stand against their incursions into the ancient forest. So far, Holdifer has been content to reclaim the old places of power and watch those who enter her forest. This character, this NPC archdruid, is the head of the faith of all the druids, of the old faith. And so the player character in the campaign will most likely have some sort of direct link or line or background, has something to do with the archdruid through her master druid or depending on where that person is located at in the world. They have some sort of ties. Maybe it's just rumors, maybe information, or maybe direction or a quest. So that's something to keep in mind. This is very specific. Where other classes and races, they have more than one NPC to go to. I know the rangers have that one head ranger over in Corolith, and but he's not really their leader. He just kind of organizes them, their information, and helps them out when he can, and it's a safe haven where this is the actual ruler of all the druids, the archdruid of this region of the Flanness. Okay, so also, in addition to Heldifer's home, other places where the druids may often be found are the Dryadic Fern Groves and Bad Deep. So let's go ahead and look for these places. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these icons so we can see the map. Okay, there's Beltander, and there's the Archdruid Grove right there to the east. They also mentioned in the article, Fern Groves is east of Celene, and down south, just north of Narwhal, northwest of Narwhal, is Bad Deep. And they're fully described too, as well as locations. And all this can be interlinked with somebody's background for their druid character. You know, their master who trained them has some sort of direct link with these locations as well, and maybe that's an indirect line to the information of what the Archdruid is all about. Or maybe they got orders from the Archdruid to investigate something. And there's a lot of modules and adventures in the area that has a lot to do with the druids because of all the issues that Dyvers is causing in the Wild Coast and Greyhawk, City of Greyhawk, and the Viscounty of Verbobonc, where they're extending the borders of their towns in the gnarly forest too much. They're taking over too much and abusing the woods around them, and that makes the druids very upset. Okay, let's go back to the article. The gnarly druids are dedicated to the well-being of the great forest and the training of the younger druids. As long as can be remembered, the druids have been within the forest working to keep it healthy. The gnarly druids are often referred to as the bards of the gnarly, as they value folklore. We talked about that already. They protect the forest from intrusions, exploitation, and by wanton spread of humanity and humanoids. You know, that's against humans of the different regions and also against humanoids like orcs and goblins. This results in a neutral relations with the surrounding political entities of Greyhawk, Dyvers, and Verbobonc, Cronhill's Alliance, and Celene. They work with those who have managed to build a place within the Great Forest. The Druids of the Gnarly are good terms with Gnarly Rangers, whom they view as companions in their combined stewardship of the forest. You gotta remember, in my ranger article, there's only 150 rangers in the entire Gnarly Forest. They are also on good terms with the sorority of Swan May, Werebears, and to the lesser extent, the people of the wood. The Druids feel close kinship to the Oaken Father as partners in this guardianship of the forest trees, sharing reverence for Veluna and all beings in the forest, and Druids and elves of the Gnarly Forest, clans of the Gnarly, are in cordial terms. The fairy folk of the Gnarly Forest and the druids of the Gnarly are aware of each other. Some brownies and dryads have even count the druids as friends. When outsiders threaten the forest, the druids' first choice is to send for the Gnarly Rangers. So based on that information, you know that the fairy folk can get involved. I would count them as a side character, like of quest. Like maybe one of them is being threatened, their home or a section of the forest is being destroyed, or they see monstrous intrusions into the Gnarly Forest, and they go seeking help. Something that's too beyond them they can't handle, so they go to like the druids or the rangers or the elves, and that's usually when they come into play in any of the adventures that I've seen so far. And they could also be used as a side character in somebody's background too. And I actually did that once. One of the rangers in my first campaign, I had them have a blink dog that they played with in the forest as he was being raised as a ranger or a druid character, same thing. That as he was growing up, playing in the forest, this blink dog would come often to visit him and play with him, and he had a name, and he developed a little bit of a relationship. But when this character actually became a player, when this character finally became an adventurer, the blink dog, of course, stayed behind. But who knows, maybe that blink dog will appear sometime in the future in the campaign. So there's some good ideas of what to do with the Fae as well. So in the article, I attached some fantasy elven music, of course, and then some artwork of druids. And we have the leader, the organization, the location, and some members that I added to the campaign. Now let's go ahead and look at Druids of the Old Faith. So the Druids of the Old Faith, they're a little different. The Druids of the Gnarly revere Alona, and Alona is revered by humans and elves. They have different names. The elves have a different name for her. Estrala, I think. So the Druids of the Old Faith have their own background and their own lore. And I got some lore written out here from the material. At the core of the Old Faith is Deri, the Earth Mother. She is the wellspring of life, and some Druids consider her the manifestation of Earth itself. Additionally, the Old Faith believes that each season has a Additionally, the Old Faith believes that each season has a deity which acts as a steward for that portion of the year. The identities of these gods vary depending on the faithful. Like nature, the Old Faith is very adaptable. So this faith is still of the Old Faith, like Alona, but it's a different form of it. It's a different belief system. Ever since the harsh dawn that saw the birth of man on earth, the spirits of the wild have been revered. Fertility, creation, protection, sustenance, death were all seen as aspects of the natural world. From these beliefs, the ancient Flang cults worshipping the deities Beri and Abadhai arose. So that's the difference right here, is Beri and Abadhai. Beri embodies the feminine aspect of earth. Abadhai embodies the masculine. Pelor, the wizened sun god, and Nural, the god of death, are likened to be the offspring of those two. It is unclear where the goddess Alona originated, although her close ties with the Seldarin lead many to believe that she may be an ideological splinter from that august body. These four deities are the primary focus of what has been termed the Old Faith. Among the Flanae, Alona is the spring maiden, Abadhai is the lord of summer, Beri is the lady of autumn, Nural is the winter king. At the center of the yearly cycle, the sun, symbolized by Pelor, who ensures the change of the seasons. When the Old Faith spread among the Orodins, Procon birthed 5 children to assume these roles. Atroa, spring, Sotilion, summer, Wenta, autumn, and Teltur, winter, while Velnus, Lord of the Sky, fills the same role as Pelor. Although the Old Faith have only a small following among the Sul, Braum, spring, Larg, summer, Phaeton, autumn, and Baton, winter, are the stewardship of the seasons among the communities with significant Solis presence, while Lendor keeps the cycle. Other nature gods have devoted among the Old Faith as long as the Druid remains purely of neutral alignment. So what does this mean to the campaign? You have a lot of Old Faiths here, depending on what race you are. You got the Solos, you got the Eredins, you got the elves. And these gods are all called by different names, depending on who they are, who the person is, depending on who the worshiper is. So if you have a druid in the campaign, they should choose, I think, mostly by their race, of which of these pantheons they should follow. But they all follow the Old Faith, and a lot of them have power bases here in the Gnarly Forest. A little bit more, beliefs of the Old Faith. The Old Faith of the Flanae is not about the temporal power of the church, but truths present in nature. The Druids seek to understand these truths, internalize them, and preserve them. 4 truths permeate the philosophy and teachings of the Old Faith. You have the eternal circle, the things in balance, symbolism through nature, and the power of 4. I think this information here is, great information, lore, but it can actually be role played. So if the player or the NPC by the DM wants to roleplay the druid a little bit more, I think they can refer to this information as they discuss matters, as they discuss things, as they roleplay their views in the campaign to the other players at the table. They can actually refer to some of this material and what they believe in and what they think they should do. And I think this is great background material to use in role playing. They make them feel more like a druid. Once again, I want to bring up role playing in a game. So it's not that the player is trying to role play to practice to become better and be happy with himself that he's role playing. And it's not for him to try to impress the dungeon master that he's role playing, but it's more about the other players at the table. So If the players at the table see another player at the table role-playing in character, it brings the campaign world, and the story to life more than the Dungeon Master is trying to do. It helps. So if you have 4 people sitting around a table and they're all role-playing, they're mostly role-playing not just for the DM and for themselves, but for also everybody else at that table, because it brings the entire world to life when they do that. It helps the other players at the table and also encourages them to role-play as well. So I like giving information to the players to draw from, give them inspiration for role-playing. And this information is great for a druid because he can bring this stuff up during a conversation. Like if they ask him, what do you think we should do? Maybe he can postulate this information while he gives his answer. Then you got legends, of course. We got history of the Old Faith. The first dance of Buri, but high in the summer tree. Okay, then we talk about friends of the Old Faith. The Old Faith does not exist in isolation. As an ancient religion, the Old Faith has made numerous allies over the centuries. The tenet of all things in balance between the Druids to accept the widely varying customs of faiths of the people across the Flanaess. However, a few friends bear special mentioning. And then I have a whole article on the different gnarly forest races. And they involved everything from humans to elves to gnomes to halflings. In fact, I listed it below. You get the elves. They're very cordial. Between the elves, the Old Faith stretch over a millennia. When the elves first encountered the humans, they interacted with the Flan tribes. They were devout followers of the Old Faith. The elves were impressed by the level of understanding and reverence of nature possessed by the Druids, and that friendship continues to this day. When the players are role-playing and interacting with the world, and they come across maybe some NPC elves or an elf community, they're going to be on friendly terms right away. And that's going to help a lot. They're most likely only going to want to talk to the druid and not anybody else in the group, unless somebody else stands out for some reason. The wood elves and the snow elves are the friendliest towards the druids, while the gray elves are the most reserved. The valley of the elves is an exception to the rule, but they're really far away in the campaign world, and I usually don't have them in my campaign. They're clear to the west. So we go on about the Mage of the Valley. So then the Fae. The Old Faith Druids have long relationship with the Fae. Because of the Druids' strong connection to the land and nature, they seemingly understand the capricious Fae and can treat them without dire peril. The Fae, in turn, respect the Druids and deal with them in preference to other mortals. Again, if a group comes across some Fae and a Druid in the group, they're most likely going to take that Druid seriously and befriend him quicker than the rest of the party. However, a fairy's definition of respect and dire peril are often far different from mortals. Some groves, sacred to the Old Faith, have a dryad's tree among their number or a pool that lairs a nymph. Satyrs and sprites roam and do not settle into one place very often, and often visit with the druids to share tales and receive advice. Then you have Old Lore bards. The Old Lore is a select order of bards affiliated with the Old Faith. Originally chosen from among the Flan nobility, today's bards must be human or half-elven of noble descent. The bards have a long tradition of scholarship and organized into 7 colleges, which are scattered throughout the Flanaess. The Druids entrust the Old Lore bards and many of their secrets. In return, the bards serve the often antisocial Druids as messengers and ambassadors. I haven't really thought about this one yet in the campaign. It says here that they're from Flan nobility and human and half-elven noble descent. So they got a long tradition of scholarship and 7 colleges. As far as I know, the key city of Verbobonc and Dyvers do not have a college of this organization. It could be if you added one, but I never thought about it or added it. I always assumed that all the Druid organization was out in the forest. So I don't know. I think Dyvers is less likely, because it's just run by a bunch of guilds. I think maybe the city of Verbobonc will most likely have such a college, but there's not one keyed there yet. But one could be added. Some of these things I don't add to the campaign because we haven't had a player character for that yet. What is an Old Lore bard? An Old Lore bard, is it a Druid bard multi-class? I guess it could be. It doesn't have to be. You could still have somebody with a background in the Druids, the Old Faith, and the Forest, and still just be a bard. You could have a character that was born in the gnarly, raised in the gnarly by the Druids or the Rangers of the people, have friends of the Fae, lived that life, learned but just never became a druid. They had a more affinity to music, to playing instruments, and to tap into that nature magic of what bards have with their music, and they can become a bard that way and not have to be multi-class. So this would be one of those specialist role-playing classes that I mentioned in another video about role-playing, that you can actually create a character that other newer systems would create for you. It's like newer systems like 5e and Pathfinder. They actually create a class and they release it and they publish it. And they go, oh, wow, this new class, I'm going to play him. He's so cool. Well, yeah, but you can play any of these classes in older D&D. All you got to do is role-play it and create a significant background enough, and the clothes that you wear, the way you talk, the equipment that you use, the weapons that you have that you're good with, the armor that you wear, your background, the people you know, the organization you're in. You can duplicate almost any character class that way, except for when it comes to spellcasting, of course. So if you want to be able to cast certain kind of spells, you would have to multi-class to get that. But if that's not the case, all you gotta do is just roleplay it, and you can actually be some sort of old lore bard, or whatever name that the newer editions would slap onto that base class bard, and create this new class out of thin air. So I think that's a good idea. Now, also the Rangers of the Gnarly, there's 200 of them. They're independent. They are an independent faction. They strive to bring good folk of the forest together to keep the forest independent of outside influence like Greyhawk, Dyvers, and Celene. The strict neutrality of the Old Faith keeps them from becoming fast allies with the good aligned Rangers. But the Ranger Knights often seek out the Druids for counsel, and the Druids rely on the Rangers to eliminate threats to the balance. All right, so this is something that has to be mentioned and looked at. The balance here between the organizations, why they exist, and how they work together. So we have two kinds of old faiths. We have Veluna, which is worshipped by humans and elves, and then we have the old faith of Obadhai and Barry, which is worshipped by humans and half-elves. They have, depending on the god that you worship, you have to actually look at the gods and what they believe in, their faiths, their tenets, and they, like Obadhai, cares more about nature and the forest and care less about humanity or the people that live there. All that matters is nature and the trees. And then Barry cares more about the people living in harmony with the forest. And then Alona is the same way, but Alona is more of the huntress. She believes more in the animals, the creatures that dwell in the forest. So they have different viewpoints of what's important to them. And the Obadhai is the most harsh. A worshipper would not stand against any transgressions against the forest at all. And then you look at the Rangers here. So the Rangers serve the woodsmen of the forest, the people. They protect it. They protect the people of the forest and the denizens and the creatures there. And they are good aligned. They are on friendly terms and try to assist and help out the other organizations of the forest, yes. But their first inclination is to protect people and the creatures of the forest. So when something happens to threaten the gnarly, like maybe the Wild Coast, some human city encroaching, logging the forest, or humanoids that are raiding into the forest, like a war band of 500 orcs from Blackthorn, the different organizations reach out for help with each other against it, because sometimes the incursion is maybe too much for them to handle, so they reach out for help. Like if the Fae finds a disturbance in the forest, they reach out for help. They reach out for the Rangers, they reach out for the Old Faith, the Elves. If the Elves come across something, they're going to do the same thing. So the Rangers are kind of like the Paladins of humanity. They're the fighting arm of that belief system. You know, they come in, they're the trained warriors, they're the trained trackers and hunters. When it comes to fighting, they usually call in the Rangers to take care of things. I can see that happening more often in all the adventures that I've read or I use in my campaign. That's often the case. The Rangers show up ready to kick some butt and take care of business, where all the other organizations are more about information, and they do resist, they do help, but when they need some strong arms coming in, they usually call in on the Rangers. So that's an interesting relationship between the organizations when it comes to playing your character. So if somebody's a Ranger, they're going to know this, they're going to count on this relationship with the Druids, the different faiths, and the Fae and the Elves. And so they'll get that respect. They're known. And same thing with being a Druid character. you'll expect this attitude between the different organizations and how they work together. So that's why I wanted to bring that up when it comes to role-playing in your campaign, and it'll heavily influence your background of your character. Okay, so now we have foes of the Old Faith. The Druids of the Old Faith have gained their share of enemies, as well as allies over the years. The clerics of St. Cuthbert are often rivals of the Old Faith for the devotion of the common folk, but their competition is mostly a peaceful one. As you know, the followers of St. Cuthbert are ruthless with their recruitment and spread of worship. They always use those cudgels to beat in submission to non-believers, and often they're at odds with that. So the Druids' conflict with the followers of Foltest is not heated, though, enough to rise to the level of a foe, but there's still little love lost between them. Foltest, by the way, is the god of light, resolution and law and order. They're inflexible, the sun and the moons. Often you'll have a paladin or a cleric character, and that character will definitely be at odds, as well as the St. Cuthbert character would be at odds against these organizations when they encounter them. It's best that they don't say anything when they first encounter them, or try to get any help or assistance. But they probably won't, because that's the kind of character they are. So you're going to have an argument on your hands. Ardi and the Great Kingdom. When Ardi, the largest of the migrating Uridan tribes, arrived in the eastern Flanaess, they encountered decadent Flan tribes who had forsaken the Old Faith and embraced the worship of Alman Ebor, the sibilant beast. Basically, it's the demigorgon of the Prince of Demons. Not every tribe was in the thrall of the demons, but the Ardi made no distinction between the destruction between the Old Faith and the demonic cults. By the time of the establishment of the Great Kingdom, the Ardens had completed the obliteration of the Flanaess culture. The Old Faith Druids retreated to the depths of the great forests as their circles were systematically destroyed, but prophesied that this was but a winter and they would outlast any nation that the Ardens could devise. With the fall of the Great Kingdom, their words came true and the Druid began to emerge from the forest. Now we talk about the Elder Elementalism and Thursden. In the past, the Old Faiths did not consider the cults of Elder Elementalism a danger. Even at the height of the Temple of Elemental Evil, the Old Faith could only had one Druid, Jaru Ashtaff, in Hamlet to watch the cult, as the T1 module shows. However, the Old Faith's attitude changed when the Druids learned from the Elder Elementalism was a plot by the followers of Thursden. The Old Faith considers the Unmaker the greatest of all threats, because he plots to completely destroy the Eternal Circle. The Druids aggressively seek to undo any attempts by the followers of Thursden and unleash their dread deity. So, in the T1 module and the Temple of Elemental Evil module, Jaru is instrumental in helping the players out, giving them information. He really wants to know what's going on at the temple. And the first things he does after they clear out the Moat House is request that the players go investigate the Temple of Elemental Evil. He has an agent there, but he hasn't heard from the agent in months. And the Council of Hamlet, which consists of Byrne, Rufus, Calmet of St. Cuthbert, and the Elder of the village of Hamlet, they tell the players that they have agents within Nulb, but they have no eyes on the temple itself. So they send the players looking for this information to see if it's come back to life, to see if there's any more danger. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the campaign, they're too low level, because by the time they clear out the Moat House, they're second level, maybe third level. There's no way they have any business going into Nulb at that level. They're going to get slaughtered. It's not going to be a good situation. So I like to steer the players away from that direction until they get to about at least 5th level. And in my campaign, I head them south because I got stuff going on in Ostwerk on the border of Celene. And it's one of those Living Greyhawk modules, a couple of them that have adventures down there that they keep themselves busy to get them leveled up. And it adds a lot to the campaign too. The Far Realms. Beyond the fabric of reality of the Far Realms, this horrific place is the home of the aberrations that are not part of the natural order of Orth. Normally, the Old Faith would not concern itself with matters of another plane, but sometimes the barriers between planes wear thin and things seep across the boundaries. The gruesome might of the incomprehensible beings from the far realms warp nature in disturbing and impossible ways by their very presence. This perversion of nature is an anathema to the Druids of the Old Faith, who constantly attempt to destroy the intruders and seal the breaches between the worlds. I don't really have an adventure that involves something like this, but this disturbance that Druids can sense, I have this outcast Druid of the Old Faith. He has a vision and a prophecy, but none of the Druids believe him. Only he can sense it. A disturbance of elementalism in the area, which is really the Temple of Elemental Evil coming back to life. And so he's going to all the Druids, like Drew Ashtaf, the Druid over in Sina Valley, the one down in Ostverk, and he's raving. He's trying to tell them what he can hear, what he can sense, and nobody believes him. And so he's been outcast from the Druid society, and nobody will listen to him. But that's what he senses. He does sense that disturbance of what's happening, their activities at the Temple of Elemental Evil. And he's trying to get the Archdruid aware of this, but nobody believes him yet. And hopefully the players will help show the truth, to prove that he's right in what he's saying. And I do have a prophecy that he can tell them, that I wrote out, about the Temple of Elemental Evil and the rise of the cult of elementalism. Okay, so there's Vecna. It's another thing that they're a fight against. This places of power that we talked about before that they gather. It's a natural significance to the faith. There's elemental weirds that can appear, like maybe a side adventure. Something comes through the rift, and the Druids have to fight it back. Maybe it's gotten loose and is terrorizing this local community in the forest. There's megalithic circles, great circles of the Old Faith. They're basically Druid standing stones that they gather to celebrate different holidays throughout the year. They get the sacred groves where the Druids tend those. So the Druid master that trained the Druid character most likely had a sacred grove. In fact, all the small towns, most of the small towns in the Viscounty of Verbobonc has a grove just outside of town. And I'll show that to you when we get there. They are lesser of the two worship sites and are much more common than megalithic circles. There's a megalithic circle located here in the Archdruid Grove by Beltlander, and I believe there's another one in Fern Groves. I'm not sure. I'll have to read that. But that gives you an idea where they're located at, or some of them are at least. Okay, then of course there's Ways of the World. The Ways of the World are a secret means of travel of the Old Faith Druids of the Flanaess. They access a portion of the ethereal plane, which allows the Druids to cover long distances on Orth by walking a short distance in the ethereal. The ways open to Orth between the stones of Trilithon and the megalithic circle are guarded by fae spirits bound to the gateway. Every gateway has a different guardian with different personalities. And the Druids must bargain with the fae for passage of the ways. Common prices are a bit of gossip, a song, a flower, and sometimes the fae demands a difficult, valuable gift of passage. What this would mean to me in the campaign is the masters of the Druids actually access this to get around the world. The players wouldn't have no access to this until they get a much higher level. But it's possible in the campaign that maybe one of the masters or their master shows up to take them somewhere, and then they would encounter this and learn about it. Then we have the hierarchy of the Old Faith. Druids enter the Old Faith as Oviates, where they assist more senior Druids much as acolytes assist priests. Above the Oviates are the 9 circles of initiation. When Druids first become initiates, many take on an appellation based upon the aspect of nature which speaks to them. For example, Dorandel of Hawthorn, or Jolena the Hare, and symbolizes their dedication to the neutral path of the Old Faith. So this is something maybe you want your players to do. If one of your players has a character that's a Druid, maybe you should come up with this nickname and ask him what he or she identifies with. Is it a small animal? Is it a tree, a bush, a leaf? So that'd be very useful for when it comes to role-playing in the game. Above the Oviates and the Initiates are those of the title Druid, who hold responsibility for a grove or a megalithic circle. So there you go. The person that trained them to become a Druid that they served under all these years, they tend a grove. The Druids must answer to the 9 great Druids, who each oversee one of the 9 geographical regions of Orth. Because of the vast distances involved, each great Druid is assisted by 3 arch-druids. The near-legendary Grand Druid stands at the ultimate head of the Old Faith. That means that the Great Druid in Eastern Gnarly serves the Great Druid. Druids arise from the rank of Oviate through the 9 circles of initiation by means of a series of trials and ceremonies that test their wisdom and understanding of the Druidic lore. The ranks of Archdruid, Great Druid, Grand Druid are determined by the challenge. Challenges must be made and resolved in the equinoxes and the solstices, and a Druid may only challenge the rank directly above her current one. The challenge is determined by the incumbent, but must involve sort of contest between the incumbent and the challenger. Common challenges include riddles, races, wrestling while in wild shape, or chess-style games, or any form of challenge is possible as long as both contestants face the same danger. If successful, the challenger ascends in rank and cannot be challenged that season, while the incumbent is reduced to the challenger's rank. If a druid dies while holding a rank determined by challenge, the druid of the next higher rank sets the challenge, and all claimants must compete with each other. If this happens to the Grand Druid, Barry sets the challenge, providing details of this through divinations and visions. So what does this mean to the player character? It says here that the ranks after the rank of Oviate, there's 9 circles of initiation. So to me, that would mean that'd be 9 levels of druidic character class. So at first level, it becomes a first level initiate, and then second level, then third level, then fifth level. And the ranks of Archdruid and Great Druid and Grand Druid are much higher levels. And in your campaign, it could be anything. It could be 12th level, 15th level, 18th level, 20th, whatever fits your campaign. And what that means in the campaign, when the player does level up, you could say that the 9 circles of initiation could go by without any fanfare at all. It just happens. They just go up a level. Or you can make them go train. And then when they do go train, they have to perform some ritual with the druid that trains them at that druid's grove. It could be anything. So it's up to you, of course, in the campaign to run it the way you see fit. So the Great Druid, for the region that encompasses the dominion of Greyhawk, is Holdifer Paravis, as we spoke before. Structure. Now, Verbobonc. When human settlers first moved into the area that would be the Viscounty of Verbobonc, they brought the Old Faith with them. Their clan chiefs are advised by druidic counselors, and their ceremonies were steeped in druidic custom. Although the current Viscount is now advised by Bishop Hoffren of St. Cuthbert, who is the major religion of Viscounty, by the way, many of the old ways are still followed by the rural folk of the Viscounty. Many farmers will say, "I'd rather face an army of angry billets than go to harvest without the blessings of the old ones." And the matrons of those farms must often then ask for a druidic's presence during the birth of her children to enact the enigmatic ritual of days upon the newborn child. So the Viscount is no fool. He and the Church of St. Cuthbert, for that matter, sees the influence that the Old Faith has upon certain regions of the Viscounty. Rather than incur the wrath of these factions by outlaw their religion or trying to vigorously convert them to the state of religion, the Viscount has gained powerful yet often overlooked allies within the nature folk. So what's this really mean in the campaign? When you go from town to town, most of the people revere the Old Faith, because when they have babies, when they want to bless their crops, when they want to expand their farm, that's all you have to talk to the Druids of the Old Faith. And they're the ones they turn to. But when it comes to humanity, who cares about humanity is St. Cuthbert. St. Cuthbert is the god of no-nonsense. He's straightforward, pragmatic, he's for the people, and the protection of the people. And that's gotten great favor since the Battle of Emerald Meadows and the rise of the last Temple of Elemental Evil. So often, like in the Temple of Hamlet, both religions will be worshipped evenly there, and some worship both. There's the Church of St. Cuthbert in the village of Hamlet. Looking at the map of the village of Hamlet, we got the Inn of the Welcome Wench, and across the road is a grove of Jaru Hashstaff of Elbad High. And then just to the north up the road, at the top of the hill, is the Church of St. Cuthbert. And so all these villagers here, evenly, pretty much, worship either or both faiths. The Keyed module actually points out that they worship only one, but I think more of the commoners would worship probably both. Let's look at Ostvirk. In Ostvirk, you have shrines of the lawful gods, where all the lawful gods are worshipped evenly. It's like an open shrine for all the gods to share. St. Cuthbert, Farlong, Brahm, Murica, Furtubu, Jaska. And then at the top of the hill, you have the Temple of Biri, where the priestess and druidess of Brarity worships at. And at the bottom of the hill is the Farlong chapter house of travel. Then let's look at Penwick. Penwick is in the middle of the breadbasket of the Viscounty of Verbobonc. It's a fairly sizable village. We'll go ahead and look at the map here, and you'll see on the map that there's a Druid's Grove far to the southeast. This is the map of the area and all the farms and the small stream running through it. But if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, I'll zoom in. There's the Druid's Grove, number 24, and that's a Druid of Obad High. So every village on the outskirts has a Druid Grove, or most of them anyway. Going back to the map of the eastern half of the Viscounty of Verbobonc, that's Penwick that we just looked at right there in the middle. Fulhurst Moors and Anshan on the edge of the Fens of Tor. Just out of town in the moors is a hermit druid. Then we go to Etterbuck. Just outside of Etterbuck is another Druid Grove off to the southeast. And then if we look at, and then go down to the south, Siena Valley, open up the map to Cienega, you see Fort Enmerdy is off to the east, past over the village of the Green. You see that Fort Enmerdy is on the east side of town, and across the village of Green to the west is the Church of the Cudgel, and then across the bridge is the marketplace along the road going north and south. And just off the Green to the south is the Hearth of Obad High that has a druid there that's protecting the village, or watching the village and making sure everybody behaves themselves. I covered this druid in another video I did on Cienega Valley. Back to the main map in the southern part of the Viscounty, you get the village of Hamlet right here, and that's where the grove was. And then you drop down to Sheer Knob, which is just south about 10 miles. We go to that village here, and looking at the map, I'll open that up for you, and you'll see that on the village proper is just a bunch of hills and forest. But there is a Druid's Grove just to the southwest, which is off map. Back to the main map, we zoom down to the south, just on the border of Celene, is Ostvirk, which I showed you previously. Gallows Corner even has a Druid's Grove, as well as Chiselwood, Humming's End, and Nome, I don't believe, has one. But most of the village here in the Viscounty does have it. Back to the gnarly forest, just to the north, is the free lands of Dyvers. And I know one of the villages that's within the borders of Dyvers is Sabinwich. And I know from one of the adventures that I run that there's a Druid's Grove just outside the village borders. There's been a lot of activity down there. The Druids are not happy with the people of Sabinwich because they've been abusing the forest around them, trying to expand. And that could be another adventure to put into the campaign if you decide to head that direction. And then, of course, and further in the forest here, you have all these other villages that have Druid's Groves. So the player character can be from anywhere within the gnarly forest at these small villages, because they all have groves, they all have druids, all the way down to the fairy kingdom of Celene. As far as the Wild Coast, I know there would be some Druid's Groves at some of these smaller towns, but I wouldn't expect to be too many. I don't know if a player would choose to be from there, where they could rather be from the gnarly forest, but that'd be up to them. Previously, I did a video on clerics of the Viscounty. I also listed the Old Faith religions. The first one here is Obad High. It says here that there's a shrine in Humming's End and Ruby Falls. I'm going to have to go to the big map to show you these villages. To the north in the gnarly forest, you see Ruby Falls. I'll zoom in here. It's like the northern tip of the Viscounty. And to the south, let's scroll down through the gnarly forest to Humming's End. As you can see, Humming's End is within 10 miles of the village of Hamlet, and also Ostvirk. So a player character could easily be from there as well. Back to the article, we got Bury. Locations of Bury, typical locations. There's more locations than what is shown here, but this is what I've got listed. 2 locations that I know of. One is a small shrine just outside of the city of Verbobonc called the Shrine of Bury. And also there's a Druid's Grove just outside of Penwick, which I showed you earlier. Now let's go ahead and look at Barry. There's a temple of Barry, the Earth Mother, in Ostverk, and there's a small shrine in Corbin, and there's a small shrine in dScryb. When it comes to Alona, on Chorusdeath is home of the Night Rangers. They have a shrine to Alona there. Phaeton is the god of nature. There's an agricultural center in Corbin, a chapel in dScryb, a chapel of growth in Cienega Valley. For Mirica, the Erdingleme goddess of agriculture, there's one in Corbin, another in Mol, Etterbock, and Cienega. So depending on which god that the druid worships, they can easily be from any of these places right here, or more, but these are just what I have keyed so far. Okay, last but not least, I just want to show you where these shrines were in the city of Verbobonc. So if we go outside the walls here, you got to remember the map itself is upside down. To the north is the north gate, and this is the side of Furyondy over here, where my mouse is. And if we go to west gate, there's the Shrine of Brewery, which I just told you about before. It's just outside that west gate. Right, there's a little forest right here, and that's the main merchant road that continues west along this. This is the Veldiver River. This is the merchant road that continues west parallel to the Veldiver River. It's hard to see on this map, but that's where it is. Okay, the next part of my video, we're going to talk about role-playing druids. When you play a druid, there's a lot of ways you can present yourself. Not only is it dependent upon which god you worship and how you worship him, but where you're from. If you're from the forest, if you're from a village, outside the village, and you mingle with the peasants there and the people there, the folk, you have relationship and friends, or you're out in the forest in the middle of nowhere and you become friends with the local forest animals and creatures in the Fae. And so that all influences the kind of druid you are. Also, what race you are. And so I have some photos here I'd like to share. So this picture is a powerful wood elf druid of the elven clans of the Gnarly. As you can see, she's got this enchanted staff and a ball of eldritch fire in her hand. It looks like she's floating off the ground on a bed of leaves, a leaf stream. This one is a human druid of Obed High. You can see he's very stern, very uncaring. All he concerns himself with is the forest, the trees, the brush, the rock, the streams, the air, the wind. He has very little concern for humanity or other denizens of the forest. This is Jeru Ashstaff from the T1 module, the Village of Hamlet, one of the older pictures. In his hut, he actually has a scrying bowl, and that scrying bowl is a great mechanic to give prophecy information and rumors to the players when they come to him for help. Now we have a gnome druid. What I didn't mention before is in the free assembly of gnomes in the Cron Hills, there's obviously going to be gnome druids. And each village will have a gnome druid, a head gnome druid, and a druid's grove. And this would be a great picture of one of those elders here with his staff and his happy demeanor. Another gnome druid, the highly fantastical one. This one's interesting. Not only does she have a curved dagger, but she has a sickle and a staff, a druid staff. So she looks like she'd be very effective in combat. Of course, this is one of those highly powered druids from Piazzo. Okay, a human druid of Barry. She's actually located in Ostverk on the border of the Celene to the south of the southern part of the Viscounty of Verbobonc. I use her picture for a character there that the players will interact with. She has a shrine at the top of the hill in Ostverk, which I mentioned earlier, and she's a wonderful character to interact with in the campaign. We have another elven druid of the Gnarly of Alona, obviously highly powerful. This is another druid of the Gnarly, but this is human, and you can see she probably worships Alona because of the stags in the background and the wolves and the snake. Druids can change shape at higher levels. They can befriend animals and summon them for help. Obviously, she's one of those kind of elves. Different look. This is a human druid. He doesn't have any animals in the picture and no weapons seen, but in the palm of his hand he has a plant. I would assume that this would probably be. I'd assume that he'd probably be a druid of Biri. This picture might be one of Alona or Abed High. Obviously, he's summoning forest fae creatures to protect himself or to attack any incursions into the forest to protect the forest. And now let's talk about a human druid in my campaign. So this one's an outcast. He's of the old faith. He reports to the Archdruid herself in the Eastern Gnarly, and he's rather rude and very abrasive character. But he sensed a disturbance in the forest. He sensed a disturbance, in nature, and obviously the activities of the Temple Elemental Evil is what he can sense. But unfortunately, the way he acts, because of his attitude and because of the way he acts, and he's a little sporadic, he can't give details to the prophecy that he knows and what he senses, that none of the Druids believe him. They think he's mad. And so finally, because of his raving, they actually outcast him from the Druid community. So now he spends his time in the campaign going from like Jeru Ashtaf to Cienega down to Ostverk, trying to convince those Druids to take him seriously for every disturbance that he senses coming from the Temple of Elemental Evil. And he's a great mechanic to get the prophecy of the temple to the players. And eventually the players might prove him to be right, and he'll become one of their best friends, NPC associates in the game. And so this leads me to the video that I have of the TV show Britannia, episode 1, about 25 minutes in. This character depicted here in the video is a perfect example of a druid. The scene depicts wonderfully what it looks like to be in the gnarly forest, and that he's on like a D&D type mission. He has a prophecy. He's following that prophecy like an adventure, a module, or a mission, and he rescues this girl from a village that was attacked. In the show, the village was attacked by Romans, but for my purposes, in D&D campaign, let's say the village was attacked by orcs or something, like maybe the Blackthorn orcs. A war band came up from the south, from the Welkwood, and sacked the town and killed everybody except for this one girl got away. Who happened to be there, and he rescued her. He snuck her away from the battle, from the carnage, and now he's trying to get her to safety. And in this episode, you see that he tries to explain to her what his prophecy and his mission is, and she doesn't believe it, and that he's rather rude and treats her roughly and just wants to get rid of her. He doesn't really care about her because all he cares about is nature and his mission. So let's go ahead and watch this. Yeah, so he tried to explain that he's on a mission and that he was outcast from the Druids. And she heard of this through her father, that he's a madman and they cast him out. And obviously he's very rude, he's very abrasive. And now he's going to explain to her why he stinks so much. It does. In D&D role-playing terms, that's a great idea. Because when you're out in the gnarly forest, especially if you're by yourself, what can protect you against the other animals of the forest or monsters is that smell. If you stink, if you smell like feces or death, or you smell like rotted a corpse or something, they'll smell that and they'll stay away from you. It'll actually protect you while you're sleeping. It's a great idea for characters to think outside of the box to actually get an advantage in the game, or to do something better, or to succeed. And that's what he's doing right here. And now, another reason why I'm going to show you this video is he's going to explain to you, he's going to explain to her the prophecy that he has and why he's following it. Yeah, so I convert, some of that dialogue to the Temple of Elemental Evil. So his mission is by himself, with no help from anybody, is to stop them from doing what they're doing, to stop their activities and save the world. And of course, obviously, the way he acts, all the other druids think he's mad, because they don't detect these disturbances, only he does. And he only knows this prophecy that I wrote out to give to the players later. He'll actually recite it to them. The next part of this video, which is really exciting, is when it comes to role-playing spellcasting. One thing I don't like about players when they try to role-play in D&D is they don't actually role-play their spells. I really hate it when they say, I cast Magic Missile, or Charm Person, or Sleep Spell. And that just takes the moment out of the role-playing. And it's really one of the things it turns into more of a board game. One thing that's horrible about it is the rest of the players in the party don't know what he's doing. Unless the character tells them, in role-playing terms of course, that I'm going to cast a spell and what it is, they're not going to know really what he's casting. But they're just going to see the results of it, the description of it. So I like the player to actually describe to to the party when it's his turn on his initiative that what they're seeing, the description of the kind, because that gives the power to the player to roleplay their spells specifically to create the effect that they want. Because as you know, like what color is a magic missile, it's up to the player to determine what that magic missile looks like. And that's just an example of a lot of these spells. A lot of these spells don't have visual descriptions with them. It's up for the player and the dungeon master to roleplay those descriptions in the game. And good dungeon masters do that all the time when they see the enemy casting spells that make us look really cool. Because a good dungeon master won't just tell the players, yeah, he's casting fireball. That's really bad role playing. And what you're going to do is you're going to describe that casting and the effect of that fireball. And then, of course, the players will piece it together that was a fireball spell. Same thing with players. They shouldn't just say, I just cast Charm Person, that they should describe what they're doing. So this scene coming up is a great example of role-playing really well a Charm Person spell, and he does cast that here. So here it goes. Clip because of the copyright claim. They're going to block my channel if I actually show this whole thing, so I have to stop it every so many seconds. I'm going to pause it once more, and as you can see, he's preparing his spell casting of the Charm Person or Suggestion spell. This is the best way of role-playing casting a spell. You actually start with dialogue, some description of what you're doing, your gestures, how you look, your stance, and then some dialogue, some role-playing to seamlessly blend what you're doing with the casting of the spell. It could be dramatic or it could be players that do something like that with every spell that they have. And I actually write out spell descriptions for them and I provide it to them. They don't have to use it, but I'm hoping it inspires them to roleplay more when it comes to spell casting. So this wraps up my guide on Druids of the Viscounty of Verbobonc for the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them right down below in my video here. If you want to support my channel and encourage me to create more videos like this, please go to my Patreon linked below and you can support me there. So thank you so much and happy gaming.